Okay, the first two we're going to skip. So we're going to start with the second problem, number 1, and the instructions say two-factor completed. Now this one is a 1x squared, so this is just a review of what we did on Monday. And to factor this, we're going to have our two sets of parentheses. And I know that x times x will give me the x squared. And we are looking for two numbers that multiply to the number at the back, the constant, which is 14. So if I list out factors of 14, I could have 1 times 14. I could have 2 times 7. I want to add up to the coefficient of the middle term. And the middle term we have what? -9. So looking at my list of factors, which pair even adds to 9?
7 and 2.
Yeah, the 2 and 7. But right now they add up to positive 2. And it's not to positive 2. Right now they add up to positive 9. But to make it -9, what do I have to do with both the 2 and the 7? Make both of these negative. So one of the answers is going to be x minus 2. The other answer is x minus 7. That's it for number 1.
This is what we did.
That's what we did on Monday. Yes. Next one, number 2. Now, this one is larger than a 1x squared. So if it's larger than a 1x squared, what do we have to do? Yeah, look for the greatest common factor. So what's the greatest common factor between 2, 8, and -42? 2. And 2 times what gives me 2x squared? X squared. And 2 times what gives me 8x? 4x. And 2 times what gives me -42? -21. Now, inside the parentheses, we have a 1x squared, so we're going to factor it. Now the GCF, bring it down, that needs to be your first answer. Now we're going to factor the trinomial, and I know that x times x will give me the x squared. And I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to what? -21. In order to multiply and get a negative, what does that tell me about one of the factors? One of them has to be negative. So I could have -1 times 21, -3 times 7, or reverse them. -7 times 3, -21 times 1. What do we want to add up to? +4. So which pair in that list adds a +4? -3 and 7. So we'll have an x minus 3 and x plus 7. Don't forget the GCF of 2 out in the front. Next one, number 3. If it's larger than a 1x squared, what do we have to look for? Yeah, the greatest common factor. What is the greatest common factor? 3. So factor out the 3. And 3 times what gives me the 3x squared? X squared. And 3 times what gives me the -27x? Times 9x. And 3 times what gives me -108? -36. Now we have a 1x squared to factor. So drop down the GCF, that needs to be your first answer. Put your two sets of parentheses. And I know x times x will give me the x squared up front. And I need to find two numbers that multiply to what? -36. So that means one of those factors has to be what? Negative. So I could have -1 times 36. -2 times 18, -3 times 12, -4 times 9, -5, -6 times 6. Now start reversing them. -9 times 4, -12 times 3, -18 times 2, -36 times 1. Now I need to add to what value? Look right here for the middle term. -9. So, which pair in that list adds to negative 9?
12. Negative 12 and 3.
Negative 12 and 3. So one of the binomials will be x minus 12. The other one will be x plus 3.
We gotta, with like, we turn off if we know what's gonna get out, like, say, we got the negative 3 times 12, we gonna flip it, but we know that we gotta, that's what it's gonna be. See what the answer, like.
Yeah, if you don't have this list out on the side, that's fine. Next one, number 4. If it's larger than a 1x squared, what do we have to look for? Greatest common factor. What's the greatest common factor here? X. So we'll have to factor out the x. So x times what gives me x cubed? X squared. X times what gives me negative 7x squared? Negative 7x, and x times what gives me negative 15x? Negative 15. Now again, inside the parentheses, we have a 1x squared that we do need to factor. So the GCF, bring it down, put your 2 sets of parentheses, and I know x times x will get me that x squared. Now factoring that trinomial in the parentheses, we need to find 2 numbers that multiply to what? Negative 15. So we're going to have negative 1 times 15. I have negative 3 times 5, negative 5 times 3, negative 15 times 1. What do we have to add up to? Negative 7. So in that list, which pair adds to negative 7? None of them. Negative 1 and 15 add up to 14. These add up to 2. Those add up to negative 2. Those add up to negative 14. So we can't do this last step, so the only thing we were able to do was the GCF. So when we try to say that the answer is prime, that means the GCF is 1. Was the GCF 1 on this problem?
No.
No, so the answer is not prime. The only thing we can do is factor out the GCF of x. So this one we could only do the first step, not the second.
That's the only thing that's different, like, from Monday.
What was the question?
Like, that's the only thing that's different from Monday.
Yeah, that was the only difference from Monday, because Monday all of those factored out again.
Okay.
Next one, number 5. If it's, we just have x squared, but what's the difference with number 5? We have the y squared. So go ahead, put your 2 sets of parentheses. And I know x times x will give me the x squared out front. And how do I get the y squared out the back?
Y.
Y times y. Now, we need 2 numbers that multiply to what? 36. So we're going to have 1 times 36, 2 times 18, 3 times 12, 4 times 9, 6 times 6. What do we have to add up to? Negative 15. Which pair even adds to 15? 3 and 12, but right now it's positive 15. To get negative 15, what do I have to do? Change both of these to negative. So we'll have x minus 3y, x minus 12y. Number 6. This one is larger than a 1x squared, so what do I have to look for? GCF. What's the GCF between 2, 15, and 7? Is there a GCF there?
No.
No. So if it's larger than a 1x squared, and there's no GCF to factor out, this is the new part for today. We have to do what's called the AC method. And this is called the AC method because it comes from the standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c. So on Tuesday when we're doing the special cases, what do we say that AB meant? A times B. So if I'm using the AC method, what do you think AC means? A times C. So we need to multiply A, the number in front of the x squared, by our constant C. So the AC method, multiply the number in front of the x squared with the constant at the back. So what is 2 times 7? 14. Factors of 14, I could have 1 times 14. I could have 2 times 7. Now, just like what we've been doing, we still want to add up to the middle term. So we still want to add up to the 15. So that would be 1 and 14. Now, to factor this, we're going to factor by grouping. To factor by grouping, you have to have a total of 4 terms. Right now, I only have 3. So what we're going to do with our 15x, we're going to split it up using these two numbers in our list. So instead of 15x, we're going to break it up into 1x and 14x. So bring down the 2x squared. Break up the 15x with our two numbers. So we're going to have a 1x and a 14x. Then drop down the last number, the constant is 7. So we're splitting up the 15x with 1x and 14x. And the 1 and 14 came from our list. Now to factor by grouping. You need to group the first two and group the last two with parentheses. So group the first two with parentheses, group the last two with parentheses. You did this factoring by grouping in Algebra 1, but it's been a while. Now, after you've broken it up into your two groups, you need to take the GCF out of each group. So looking at this first group, what's the GCF between 2x squared and x? So we're going to factor out an x for this first group. So x times what gives me 2x squared? 2x. And x times what gives me the 1x? A 1. Now we're finished with the first group. Now for the second group, same thing. Factor out the GCF for the second group. So what's the GCF between 14 and 7? 7. Since this first one in the group is positive, it's going to be a positive 7 that I factor out. Now 7 times what gives me the 14x? 2x. 7 times 2x is 14x. And 7 times what gives me 7? A 1. Now we're ready to write our two answers. So go ahead and write your two sets of parentheses. One of your answers is going to be what's called the common binomial factor. And if you look inside the parentheses, what binomial do they have in common? 2x plus 1 is one of our factors. The other factor comes from your GCF. So the GCF, we have an x and a plus 7. So x plus 7. Okay, so that's what we're doing today. That's the main thing. Just to recap what we did. It's called the AC method. You multiply A times C. So 2 times 7 gave us 14. We need to split up the 15 using the 1x and the 14x. Once you have those 4 terms by splitting up the middle one, group the first two, group the last two. After you group them, factor out the GCF out of those groups. One answer will be the binomial that's in common. The other answer will be the GCF. Now, these should always be the same. If they're not the same, you made a mistake somewhere. Go back and check your work. Number 7. If it's bigger than a 1x squared, what should you look for? GCF. Is there a GCF between 2, 13, and 15? No. So we'll have to use the AC method. So we'll have to multiply A times C. So what is 2 times 15? 30. Factors of 30, I could have 1 times 30, 2 times 15, 3 times 10, 5 times 6, that's it. We still want to add to the middle term, so what do we need to add up to? 13. So in that list, which pair adds to 13? 3 and 10. So instead of 13x, we'll split it up into 3x and 10x. So bring down the 2x squared. Instead of 13x, split it up into 3x and 10x. Drop down to 15. Once you have 4 terms, group the first 2, group the last 2. Factor out the GCF out of both groups. So looking at the first group, what's the GCF between 2x squared and 3x? X. What would go in the parentheses? 2x plus 3 is right. For the second group, what's the GCF between 10 and 15? 5. And if the first one in the group is positive, it's going to be a positive 5. And what goes in the parentheses? 2x plus 3. Now we're ready to write our 2 answers. So what binomial do they have in common? The 2x plus 3. The other factor comes from the GCF. So what were the GCF? X and plus 5.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are the binomials always going to be the same?
These 2 right here should always be the same if you factored correctly. So if those do not end up being the same, you made a mistake somewhere. Go back and check your work. Oops, went too far. Next one, number 8. Bless you. Number 8, if it's larger than a 1x squared, what should you look for? Greatest common factor. What's the GCF for this one? 3.
Oh, thank you.
But 3 times, this would be a 2x squared. 3 times what gives me negative 9x? Negative 3x. And then the minus, and 3 times what gives us 42? 14. Now bring down the GCF, bring down the 3. Notice this is still bigger than a 1x squared. So if it's bigger than a 1x squared, you have to do the AC method. So we'll have to do 2 times negative 14. And what's 2 times negative 14? Negative 28. So this would be negative 1 times 28. Negative 2 times 14. Negative 4 times 7. Flip them around. Negative 7 times 4. Negative 14 times 2. Negative 28 times 1. What do we want to add up to? Negative 3. So which pair adds to negative 3? Negative 7 and 4. Now, when I write my 4 terms, I'm going to group them inside of brackets instead of parentheses, because when I group them, I'm going to have more parentheses. So I don't want parentheses inside parentheses, so I'm just going to put my 4 terms inside square brackets just to separate it off. So 2x squared, drop it down. Instead of the negative 3x, how do I split up negative 3x? Minus 7x plus 4x brings down the minus 14. Once you have the 4 terms, that's right, group them. So group the first 2, group the last 2. So that's why I use those square brackets for the 4 terms, so I wouldn't have parentheses and parentheses and get confused. So drop down to 3. After you group them, you need to take the GCF from each group. So looking at this first group, what's the GCF? X. What goes in the parentheses? 2x minus 7. Looking at the second group, what's the GCF? 2. And if the first one in the group is positive, it's going to be a positive 2. And what goes in the parentheses? 2x minus 7. Now I'm ready to write my answer. The very first answer you need to write down is the GCF, so the 3 goes first. What is the binomial that they have in common? 2x minus 7. And what's the GCF? We had x and the plus 2. So x plus 2. Now again, yes, 2x minus 7, 2x minus 7, those should match. If they don't match, you made a mistake somewhere. Number 9. If it's larger than a 1x squared, what should you look for? GCF, and what is a GCF? A 2, so factor out the 2. 2 times what gives me 4x squared? 2x squared. And 2 times what gives me negative 6x? Negative 3x. And 2 times what gives me negative 40? Negative 20. Drop down to 2. The GCF goes out front. Now again, if it's larger than a 1x squared, what do you have to do? AC method. So A times C. What do we multiply here? 2 times negative 20 is? Negative 40. So we have negative 1 times 40. Negative 2 times 20. Negative 3, negative 4 times 10. Negative 5 times 8. Flip them around. Negative 8 times 5. Negative 10 times 4. Negative 20 times 2. Negative 40 times 1. What do we have to add up to? Negative 3. Which pair? Negative 8 and 5. So again, I'm going to use brackets to put the 4 terms inside to bring down the 2x squared. And how do I split up the negative 3x? Minus 8x plus 5x minus 20. After you have the 4 terms, group the first 2, group the last 2. Drop down the GCF. And looking at the first group, what's the GCF for this first group? 2x. What goes in the parentheses? X minus 4. For the second group, what's the GCF? 5, and if the first one is positive, it's going to be a positive 5. What goes in the parentheses? X minus 4. Now we're ready to write our answer. So what should be the very first answer? Okay, what is our first factor? 2. What is our next factor? X minus 4. And what is our last factor? 2x plus 5. So don't forget that GCF. Pull that GCF down with every single step. Don't leave it off. Next one, number 10. If it's larger than a 1x squared, what do we have to look for? GCF. Is there a GCF here? No, so if it's larger than a 1x squared, how do I factor this? AC method. So what do I need to multiply? 7 times 4 is? 28. So I could have 1 times 28. I could have 2 times 14. I could have 4 times 7. What do we need to add up to? Negative 11. Which pair even adds to 11? 4 and 7. Right now they add the positive 11, so what do I need? Make both of these negative. Drop down to 7x squared. Instead of the negative 11x, how do I split that up? Negative 4x minus 7x. Both of these are negative. And then the plus 4. After you have your 4 terms, what do we do next? Group them. So we need to group the first 2, group the last 2, And we need to keep a plus sign in the middle.
Always.
Always a plus in the middle.
This is the negative.
Even if it's a negative, you need to add a negative. Okay, so now, looking at the first group, what's the GCF for the first group? X, and what goes inside the parentheses? 7x minus 4. For the second group, what's the GCF? 1, but if the first term in the group is negative, that means your GCF is negative, so this needs to be a negative 1. So negative 1 times what gives me negative 7x? 7x. So negative 1 times what gives me 4?
Negative 4.
Negative 4. So what's one of the answers? 7x minus 4. What's the other answer? X minus 1. Okay, we are skipping number 11. We're going to number 12. If it's larger than a 1x squared, what should you look for? GCF. Is there a GCF between 9, 6, and 8? Is 3 going to 8? No. So is there a GCF? No. So if it's bigger than a 1x squared, what do we have to do? AC method. They need to multiply 9 times negative 8. And I want you to finish number 12. We'll check your answers in a minute. We skipped number 11. Yes, we skipped number 11.
I know. That's why I said it.
We're quietly doing number 12. We skipped number 11. We're doing number 12. Grace, you need to wake up.
Will we have homework tomorrow?
Yes, you'll have homework every night instead of test night. So like next Tuesday, you take your test, you won't have homework Tuesday. Thursday? Tuesday.
Two, then.
I ain't gonna be in.
Okay, number 12. AC method multiply 9 times negative 8. What does that give you? Negative 72. Negative 1 times 72. Negative 2 times 36. Negative 3 times 24. Negative 4 times 18. Negative 5. Negative 6 times 12. Negative 7. Negative 8. Negative 9. Go ahead and start flipping them. Negative 12 times 6. Negative 18 times 4. Negative 24 times 3. Negative 36 times 2. Negative 72 times 1. What do we have to add up to? Positive 6. So in that list, which pair adds a positive 6? 12 and negative 6. This one right here. Negative 6 and 12. So bring down the 9x squared. How do I split up the 6x?
Minus 6x.
Minus 6x plus 12x minus 8. Group the first two. Group the last two. What's the GCF for the first group? 3x. What goes in the parentheses? 3x minus 2. What's the GCF for the last group? 4, and if the first one in the group is positive, it's a positive 4. And what goes in the parentheses? 3x minus 2. So what is one of the factors? 3x minus 2. What is the other factor? 3x plus 4. Okay, number 13. I want you to do number 13, and we'll check your answers here in a minute. Okay, number 13. Since this one is larger than a 1x squared, and there's not a GCF, we will have to do the AC method. So we'll need to multiply the 12 times 1. So factors of 12, I could have 1 times 12, 2 times 6, 3 times 4. We're looking for a pair that adds to -7. So the only pair that adds to 7 is 3 and 4. We need to make both of these negative. So drop down the 12x squared and break up or split up the -7x into -3x and -4x. Bring down your +1. Once you have your 4 terms, group the first two, group the last two. You need to keep a plus sign between the two groups. Once you have them broken up, or once you have them grouped, take the GCF of each group. So the GCF for the first group would be 3x. Inside the parentheses, we'll have 4x minus 1. The GCF for the second group is a 1, but since the first term in the group is negative, our GCF is -1. And -1 times 4x gives us -4. And -1 times -1 gives us +1. So the first answer is the common binomial factor of 4x minus 1. Second factor comes from the GCF, which is 3x minus 1.